What's up, YouTube? So last video I made not too long ago was going over how I couldn't, or how it's almost impossible for people to find an apothecary, and lo and behold, I actually found an apothecary. So we're going to examine what exactly I did and if you can possibly find an apothecary, because I did get inspired by someone else's video called Snoobay85, and that guy is amazing, so go check him out. Has some very, very cool farming strats. And before we start, I just wanted to show you the coolest cull job I've done in a while. So you actually can't really cull a beast, so I'm not really sure what happened here. It must have just been some crazy beast that was just ODing on scarabs, right? This beast was living life large, and he found a bunch of scarabs. The TLDR. So before we start, let's go see how we actually found the apothecary. So this was actually my last map of the night.
Okay.
And yeah. So I was just like, man, I've got to get an apothecary. So if you want to see something interesting, is that the map actually has 201% quant, 65% pack size, right? So at this point, I'm like pretty despaired. I've done a lot of these maps. I think I did over 40 of these maps last night, and I did a lot of them in group magic finding. And let's just say group magic finding is pretty mediocre. But you can see here, it's gonna drop here, right? Harbinger, and wow, a Harbinger mob dropped it.
Yes, one more map is good. It dropped from a fucking, what's it called?
A Harbinger mob.
A Harbinger.
Yeah, at this point, I wasn't really too pleased. I was very disappointed with the group magic find session. So I was like, we finally dropped it, right? So how do we actually drop it? And is it actually replicable? And did I just get lucky? And maybe I did just get lucky, but so I did make a previous video about why you cannot find apothecary. So I did feel like I wanted to follow up on that and show that it is possible to find an apothecary. Maybe I'm lucky, maybe not. But I'm just going to present you the farming method, and you can decide whether you want to do it or not. I did do pretty much identical strat last time. If you remember from last league about the wandering path strat with Strongboxes, and I did get inspired because this lucky guy, found 2 apothecary in 100 maps. So he put a video out, 100 maps, Divination farming on Crimson Temple, prepping the results 16 to 20 div per hour, right? And that just sounds amazing. Who doesn't want to make 20 divines per hour when the current best strats are around 5 to 6 divines per hour outside of 5 ways? So be sure to go check this guy out. He is pretty 5-hit when it comes to stuff. Comes up with some great ideas. And most importantly, he actually tests out the strats within a large sample size to give some validity to them. So right here, he's just play. Okay, so we actually missed the draw. So he actually drops it from the Strongbox, and both of them actually drops it from the Strongbox. So he's doing Crimson Temple, Deli, and we're going to go over why we want to do Deli.
The apothecary.
And he actually found 2 in 13 maps. He can't even believe it himself. He's just laughing up a storm.
2 apothecaries in 20 maps.
He's using Gloom Shrine, as you can see.
A lot of profit. I am going to have to normalize the drop rates downward significantly.
So you can see how he actually dropped it. He got it from an ambush box, but let's talk about the method that he was using. So he ran 100 Crimson Temples, and he's using 8 mod corrupted rare quality. Now there's different ways that you can get 8 mod maps, and his way of doing it is he actually uses a sextant that I'm actually currently using and tried out. And you're using a sextant that gives you maps found in your maps are corrupted with 8 modifiers. That means all of the maps that you drop will be 8 modifiers. So let's actually go on my other character that I was doing the magic finding with right here. So for this method, you actually need this 8 mod map right here. And then you can see here the maps are like this. So they have 98 quant, 120 quant is also possible. Now the nice part about these maps is that they have a lot of quant on them, but the problem with it is it doesn't have quality. But you can see here, the maps are actually pretty hard in general. So you actually do get a lot of these maps, especially when you duplicate them. So you can see here, there's the apothecary card that we actually did find. So for the Kirak bench, he's using ambush. He highly believes that ambush is not really nerfed at all. And it's probably true. And I did mention in the previous video, in my apothecary video, that ambush and alva were the main sources of apothecaries in the past. Now for Scarabs, he's using Gilded Ambush, he's using Gilded Divination, Gilded Harbinger, and Polished Elder, and these are pretty much made because they're cost effective for Harbinger, and Gilded Divination for the more, more Divination cards, and Gilded Ambush for more Strongboxes, and Elders just for some extra mobs. Now for Sextants, he's using Elevated Gloom Shrine. He pretty much uses Gloom Shrine to supplement his build because his build doesn't have Headhunter right now. And he has Elevated +3 Strongbox and 500% Strongbox, and he's running Deli Mirror. His investment is 40 chaos per map, or that's what he calculated at. And it probably is true that he actually did buy the mats at 40 chaos, but right now, 40 chaos per map is probably a gross understatement, because right now if you try to buy Gilded Ambush or Divination in bulk, they're like 10C each, so that's already 20 chaos. The Elevated Sextants alone I think are 40 chaos per 4 use, so that's another 10 chaos. So I do think that the investment per map is probably not accurate, and it's probably higher, like 60 to 70 chaos range, which would change the profit per hour a lot. And his results, as you see here, this is his excellence. He did find 2 Apothecary, 18 Simulacrum, 6 Divine Orbs, 10 the Enlightened cards, and 4 7 Ears Bad Luck. So it is 4. So you can pretty much conclude from this, just because of his Divination card drop rates, that he was incredibly lucky with the Apothecary drops. If you ever done any Magic Finding in Crimson Temple before, you know the rate of 4 7 Years Bad Luck to 2 Apothecaries is just insane. And 10 Enlightens to 2 Apothecaries is also not right. But I think he did try to normalize it. And if you do look at his overall profit, I think half of the profit was from the Apothecary cards. So not really sure exactly how much profit per hour. So it's 16 to 20 div. And then you have to cut it in half pretty much. So 8 to 10 divines per hour. And then you have to account for the fact that nowadays the investment per map is probably much higher. So it's probably back down to a 6-7 divine per hour strat, which is still pretty good, especially if you haven't factored in the fact that you can get incredibly lucky and find Apothecaries. So for his, his Atlas tree, he's not using Wandering Path, which is what I'm using currently. He's taking the Deli nodes. And it's actually really weird to me. He's not filling out the quant wheel right here, but he's pretty much wanting to block off all of these things. This node right here, I don't really agree with taking, but it really depends on how strong your build is. So if I was me, I'd probably drop these points and put it into the quant wheel. And he is taking Harbinger nodes to get King Harby, because he is using Gilded Harbinger's Sextant. And he's taking all the Shrine nodes over here. And he does have all of the Strongbox nodes that allows him to duplicate. And I don't really know why he's using this node right here, or because he has the tamper proof on the Sextant, but it depends on what Sextant combination he's currently running. But overall, this tree looks very, very good, and it does allow him to maximize his main strategy, which is the Strongboxes. Now, a lot of people also ask me, should you use Delirium Mirror or Deli Orb? And Delirium Mirror is different in that it allows you to Vol Orb your maps, and it also allows you to use the Sextant to drop the corrupted maps. Since the maps drop corrupted, that means you can't actually put a Deli Orb on them. So if you go to try to do that, it says target is corrupted. So you actually can't do Deli Orbed maps and corrupt them. You would have to roll the maps individually and then Deli Orb it. And then you might have to risk the map turning into Vol Temple, which is not the worst thing in the world. But there's also a chance that it doesn't change at all. There's also the chance that it could turn unID'd. And this is actually a really, really good outcome, because if it turns unidentified, it actually gains 20% or 30% quant, I think. So I'm actually running Defiled Cathedral. So all these maps have plus 30% quant. Now the problem with this is you have to pre-roll a batch, and then you have to remember what the mods are on. So you have to make sure you don't roll some bad mod, or an unID'd map will be bad. Because I personally can't do Fizz Reflect at the moment. Now the big problem with Deli Mirror is that it does not really last the whole map, and it kind of runs out halfway through a lot of times. So there's different ways to pause the fog. You could technically use Harbinger, which is what he's trying to do to pause the fog. And if you run Defiled Cathedral, you will see that the Deli Mirror won't actually last the whole time. And you do have to invest in points into the map, so you have to take these points right here. Dissipates slower and increases faster with distance from the mirror, with Dissipate slower being the most important one, because it actually makes it last a lot longer for the fog. But the problem with this is it actually makes the map also a lot harder. If you're at the very, very end of a Deli Mirror, it's probably around 80 to 100% Delirium. And Deli Mirror Sextant is around 30 to 35 chaos per 4 uses. which actually comes out to be around the same as using a Deli or like 2 Deli orbs, like the worst Deli orbs. So this is something to keep in mind between Deli Mirror versus Deli Orb. The big benefit of Deli Mirror is that you can actually run corrupted maps and use that Sextant to find the maps and not have to worry about potentially breaking your map in the Vault Temple. Now, the next up, the question that a lot of people have is, should you run Defiled Cathedral or Crimson Temple? Now, both these maps drop Apothecary, 7 Years Bad Luck, and the Enlightened. So this is all the drops for the Crimson Temple, and this is all of the drops for Defiled Cathedral. Now, Defiled Cathedral is a slightly better layout, but it's worse for Deli Mirrors. And this is pretty much because Defiled Cathedral is like an oval shape. So no matter what, the Deli Mirror will run out once you reach halfway across the oval. Now, Defiled Cathedral does have 2 extra cards that add to value, and it actually adds up pretty significantly in the long run. So you have the Innocent card, which is 40 Regret Orbs, and then you have the Crymo Necrosis, which is actually a Corrupted Blood card. So you can see here, I have the Innocent, and I did find, so this is like what? Quite a bit of Regret Orbs, and then we have this one here, and I'm going to turn it in right here. We actually have 3 of these sets done from our mapping session, and let's go see here. You turn in a CB Jewel, and you could potentially get something good. This is pretty bad, but it's very, very possible to get a Jewel that's worth like multi-divines or something, but these are all pretty just terrible. And then of course there's the regrets that you can turn in, and right here you can see 160 regrets is it's not that bad. So 1 regret is, that's like 80 chaos or so. So it's not the worst, not the best, but it is something extra that does add to your profit. And I do think most of it will come down to the layout. Some people really like Crimson Temple. Some people really like Defiled Cathedral, but Defiled Cathedral is also slightly better for Legion, which you could put on your map device. Now, next up, we have my alternative method, which is what I do to change things up. And the big thing is any quantity bonus from a map is multiplicative of all other modifiers. And this is especially important because I am running Magic Find gear on my character. So if you are running some baseline Magic Find gear, maybe this method is better. So you can see here, I actually have 79% quant and 569% rarity for the character I'm using to clear the map. So that means having a really, really high quantity on the map is super, super important. Now, I did look up on Wiki, and only the increased item quantity of the area or map affects Strongboxes. Now, this is pretty important because I'm not really sure exactly where most of the cards drop, whether it is from the Strongbox opening up or from the mobs that come out of the Strongbox. And that's a pretty big distinction because your item quantity or your MF gear doesn't actually affect the Strongbox opening and the loot that comes out, but it does affect the mobs. So if the mobs are dropping the apothecaries, then it matters a lot if you're running Magic Find gear. But regardless, item quantity on the map is super, super important. And a lot of times when you run Wandering Path, you're able to get 300% quant on the map and 60+% pack size. So therefore, I decided to go Wandering Path. So what actually Wandering Path does, for a lot of people wondering, is that it makes it so you have 100% increased effect of Small Atlas passive skills. So you can see here, most notably, these are 4% now instead of 2. These quant nodes here are 2% instead of 1. And then right here, you have 2% and 10% rarity instead of 1% and 5%. And you can also get 20% quant on your Strongboxes opening. And then for here, you can get some extra percent chance to open, and you can get more duplicated maps. And I also decided to take some Torment nodes for quantity on Tormented Spirits. And this also allows you to spawn a few more Beyond bosses. And overall, I feel like Wandering Path is the better option, especially if you're running any sort of Magic Find gear. Also gives you additional pack size on Eater. And if you do put Legion, it gives you a higher chance of getting Marikep and Templar. So you can also get more chances of getting a Shrine, so 20, 20, 20. But however, you do lose all of the notables because they do nothing, so you can't get the extra guaranteed Shrine from that node. And you also can't get the guaranteed Strongbox from Twice Tempted. So it's kind of a trade-off. But I do think that quant is the most important thing. And another thing that I do think is understated is that increasing the quantity of the map will also increase the payout when you hit the jackpot from a God Touch rare. So say you find a God Touch rare in a 100% quant map, and then you find it in a 250% map. you should technically find 2.5 times the amount of loot. Now, I have found a few God Touch rares, and they did drop like 3 or 4 divines, but I haven't really hit a jackpot in a 300% quant map. So I do think that this is something to take into consideration when you use Wandering Path. Now, maps are a lot harder with Wandering Path because of the increased effect of non-modifiers. So the way the increased effect of non-modifiers work is that it actually scales up the stuff on the map. So if you ever have a map where it's 60% less recovery rate of life and energy shield, then you're pretty much going to be running a no regen map, which makes it a lot harder. And if you have monster life 42%, it's going to be like 80% increased monster life. So your character needs to be relatively strong in order to do Wandering Path, especially if you want to run any sort of magic find. Now, overall, what do I actually think of the method? I think it is incredibly RNG. It is incredibly hit or miss, and it's not going to be consistent profit. And I do think in today's age where there's not really any strategy that's super, super good, and pretty much anyone will adopt any strategy that comes out or someone makes a YouTube video about, the price of any mapping materials is going to skyrocket. Like Sextants for Strongbox have already gone up, and that's pretty much because of the guy's video. I think Strongbox Sextants are like 50 chaos. Gilded Ambush and Divination are like 10 chaos each or 15 chaos. And at a certain point, you're pretty much playing a lotto where eventually the buying cost is just so high that you could have just saved money and bought the Apothecary straight up. But it is always fun to gamble, and it is possible the price of mapping materials does go down. But as of right now, I do think it is a pretty big gamble whether you find the Apothecary or not. And there are probably better money-making methods that don't rely on such a high RNG. Now, I do think that Wandering Path is probably your best bet, and nothing beats out map quantity. And for people who are wondering if the guy actually got lucky, he might be lucky, but there is someone in my chat who did around 250 or 300 maps with the exact same strategy, and he's found 0 Apothecaries so far. He's not using Wandering Path, but he is doing the Strongbox, Enraged Strongbox, and Deli mirror. So take that for what it's worth. But I do think that Strongboxes are your best hope of finding an Apothecary. I know in my clip personally, I found the Apothecary from pretty much a Harbinger mob. So in the end, you can see it's literally all RNG, but the Wandering Path quant probably definitely helped out, especially with the item quant that I have on my Magic Find character. In the end, TLDR, just get lucky, and you can always increase your chance if you have more quant on the map, and you have more Magic Find on your character, and you have more Strongboxes on the map. So it's pretty much you're trying to win the lotto, and you're getting yourself as many chances as you can. And I do think that this is the best way of getting it, and it is to maximize the quant on your map. And for people wondering what Scarabs I was running Gilded Divination, Gilded Reliquary. I'm still on the fence about Gilded Reliquary because I haven't really found a tier 1 unique yet or tier 0. But I guess if you find 1 Mage Blood, it's all worth it. But I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And then I was actually running Legion because Legion actually gives more rares for God Touch than any other mechanic in the game. And then I was running Gilded Ambush Scarab. So those are the Scarabs I'm using. So you could probably drop Reliquary Scarab if you're not actually a Magic Find character. But hopefully, if you try out this method, let me know down in the comments below if you find an Apothecary. But do know that the profit is not consistent, and it could even be negative money if the Sextants and Scarabs go up too much. And be sure to check out Snoob's channel and drop him a follow if you like his content. It's very, very detailed. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more Mirrors, Exalted Orbs, and Mage Bloods than me. And see you next time. Bye.